You're standing in a room full of noise. Laughter overlaps with forced confidence. Conversations compete for dominance. Everyone is performing, subtly negotiating status, approval, relevance. And then there's you. You're not withdrawn, you're not awkward, you're not lost, you're watching. Your silence isn't empty, it's measured. While they talk, you observe patterns. Who needs validation? Who interrupts to feel important? Who laughs a little too hard? You're reading the room without trying to control it, and somehow they feel that. They don't know why your silence bothers them. But it does. It's not that you said anything offensive. You didn't challenge anyone. You didn't demand attention. Yet there's a flicker of irritation when their eyes land on you. A subtle tension. As if your stillness is exposing something they'd rather keep hidden. The loneliest person in the room is often the most powerful, because the one who isn't trying to belong can't be controlled by the room. Something has shifted in you recently. You don't chase conversations the way you used to. You don't rush to fill silence. You're comfortable standing alone, and they sense it before you fully understand it yourself. There was a time when you tried harder. You adjusted your tone to make people comfortable. You laughed when things weren't funny. You explained yourself in detail, hoping clarity would earn acceptance. You volunteered your depth into conversations that were never built to hold it. You shrank sharp edges, softened strong opinions, translated your intensity into something easier to digest. You performed, not because you were fake, but because you wanted connection. You thought belonging required calibration. So you studied reactions. You measured responses. You edited yourself in real time. Most social dynamics run on subtle approval seeking. It's a quiet exchange. I validate you, you validate me. I nod at your story, you nod at mine. Everyone feeds the cycle, and then you stepped out of it. You stopped over-explaining. You let silences breathe. You stopped offering pieces of yourself to people who only wanted something entertaining, not something real. You stopped shrinking to protect fragile egos. That withdrawal didn't go unnoticed. They can feel something changing. When you're no longer trying to be liked, the entire rhythm shifts. The room loses leverage over you. You're not scanning faces for approval anymore. You're not adjusting your personality to match the dominant energy. You're operating from somewhere deeper now. And for the first time, you're not asking the room who you're allowed to be. They see the quiet version of you now, the composed one, the distant one. What they didn't see was the process. They didn't see the betrayal that recalibrated your trust. The moment you realized loyalty isn't always mutual, the conversations where you tried to explain your intentions, only to be misunderstood anyway, the subtle exclusions, the inside jokes you weren't part of, the feeling of being present but never fully included. You were told you were too intense, too serious, too different, too much. So you adjusted. You gave people chances. You opened up carefully. And still, at some point, something fractured. Loneliness wasn't your preference. It was a consequence. You learned the hard way that not everyone deserves access to your depth. You saw behind masks because you once believed in them. You trusted fully. And when that trust was mishandled, it didn't just hurt. It clarified. Most people go back to comfort after pain. You didn't numb yourself with constant distraction. You didn't immediately replace depth with noise. You sat with it. You let it sting. You replayed conversations. You analyzed patterns. You started noticing inconsistencies in people's words and behavior. Isolation became your training ground. You began thinking more, watching more, speaking less. Not out of fear, but out of precision. You realized that silence reveals more than interrogation ever could. Pain sharpened your perception. What once overwhelmed you now informs you. What once wounded you now warns you. You don't attach blindly anymore. You don't overcommit emotionally without evidence. This version of you is harder to access, not because you're closed, but because you understand the cost of being open without discernment. And that understanding changed everything. They're not irritated because you're loud. They're not threatened because you dominate conversations. You don't. They're unsettled because you're unmoved. Your detachment exposes something they work hard to hide. When you don't compete for attention, it highlights how much they do. When you don't rush to prove yourself, it reveals how desperately they need to. Your calm becomes a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see in it. Your silence forces them to sit with themselves. And most people avoid that at all costs. You don't react when baited. You don't chase when someone pulls away. You don't over-explain your intentions just to ease suspicion. You answer directly, briefly. Sometimes not at all. That lack of accessibility triggers them because accessibility is currency. If they can predict you, they can position themselves above you. If they can provoke you, they can measure your limits. If they can label you, they can minimize you. But you've become difficult to categorize. Are you confident? Guarded? Disinterested? Planning something? They can't tell. And the human mind is unsettled by what it can't define or control. Uncertainty feels like a threat. So they project. They whisper. They test you subtly. Still, you don't move. You're no longer performing reactions on command. You're not offering emotional access to anyone who hasn't earned it. That's what frustrates them, because when someone can't be easily read, they can't be easily manipulated. You've stepped outside the predictable patterns that keep most social hierarchies intact. And whether they admit it or not, they feel the shift. That's power. The truth is, the real battle was never with them. It was with yourself. They only saw the outcome, the distance, the composure. What they didn't see was the internal war that almost pulled you back into old patterns. You fought the urge to beg for inclusion when you felt excluded. You fought the instinct to send one more message, to explain yourself one more time, to clarify your intentions, so nobody misunderstood you again. You fought the quiet panic that whispered, maybe you're the problem. There were nights you overthought everything. Replayed conversations, analyzed tone shifts, questioned your worth, wondered if being different automatically meant being difficult. You dissected your own personality like a suspect under interrogation. And still, you stayed silent. Not because you didn't care, but because you were rebuilding. You began detaching from outcomes, from needing immediate reassurance, from the addiction to being validated in real time. It wasn't clean, it wasn't instant. Some days you almost broke your own boundaries. Some days you missed the old version of you who tried harder, but you didn't go back. This was the psychological deepening phase, the part no one applauds, the part where you sit alone with uncomfortable truths about your triggers, your insecurities, your fear of being overlooked. Power didn't come from dominating a room. It didn't come from becoming colder or louder or more aggressive. It came from emotional regulation, from feeling the surge of anger and not reacting, from feeling rejection and not collapsing, from feeling misunderstood and not over-explaining. You learned to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. That's rare. Most people are ruled by impulse. They text when emotional. They speak when triggered. They lash out when insecure. They fill silence because they can't tolerate it. You trained restraint, and restraint builds stability. Now, when tension enters the room, you don't absorb it, you assess it. When someone tests you, you don't flinch, you decide. The chaos that once lived inside you has quieted. Not because life became easier, but because you became steadier. What they call loneliness, you've learned to treat as leverage. When you're alone, you're not distracted by performance. You're not pulled into unnecessary drama or shallow competition, observing, quietly mapping the room. You notice who aligns with who flatters upward, who subtly undermines, who switches personalities depending on status. You see alliances forming before they become obvious. You detect insecurity beneath polished confidence. You hear the strain in someone's laugh. You catch the micro-expressions that reveal more than words ever could. Solitude sharpened that. While others leak energy trying to maintain an image, you conserve yours. You're not constantly explaining yourself, defending yourself, or advertising yourself. You move selectively, speak intentionally, engage when it serves a purpose. That conservation compounds. Most people never reach this stage. They trade depth for distraction. They fill every empty moment with noise, so they never have to confront themselves. They scroll, they gossip, they overcommit socially just to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. You didn't. You sat in the silence long enough for it to stop feeling like punishment. Long enough for it to become clarity. And clarity gave you precision. You no longer react to every opportunity. You evaluate. You no longer attach to every connection. You filter. You no longer reveal everything you think. You measure. This isn't social failure. It's strategic separation. You removed yourself from environments that required you to shrink. You stepped back from dynamics that thrived on emotional chaos. And in that distance, your perception expanded. Now, you're not just present in the room, you're aware of the room. And awareness, when paired with restraint, becomes quiet power. This is where your identity elevates. You no longer crave being understood by everyone in the room. You don't feel the need to translate yourself into something more digestible. If someone misreads you, you let them. If they don't have the depth to meet you, you don't shrink to accommodate them. You've shifted from wanting universal approval to valuing selective alignment, and that shift is rare. Most people oscillate between craving attention and resenting it. They want to be seen, but only in controlled ways. They want validation, but complain about judgment. They're trapped in a cycle of seeking and resisting at the same time. You stepped outside that cycle. You're no longer performing for applause, and you're no longer withdrawing out of insecurity. You engage when it aligns. You disengage when it doesn't. No dramatics, no announcements. This isn't your final form. You're still evolving, but now it's intentional. Your growth isn't a reaction to betrayal anymore. It's not fueled by proving someone wrong. It's directed by standards, by vision, by discipline. They sense this growth. To them, it feels like distance, like you've become harder to reach, harder to influence, harder to fully know. But what feels like distance to them is expansion for you. You're not isolating. You're refining. The loneliest person in the room is often the only one not afraid of being alone. And when you're not afraid of being alone, you're not easily pressured, not easily seduced by attention. not easily intimidated by exclusion. That changes the hierarchy. Because the one who needs the room the least often controls the energy of it the most. And you've stopped needing the room. Silence is misunderstood. Most people think it signals weakness, insecurity, or social discomfort. But real silence, controlled silence, is psychological dominance. When you don't rush to speak, you control the pacing of the interaction. Conversations bend toward the one who isn't scrambling to fill the gaps. Silence forces projection. People start revealing themselves just to escape the tension. They over-explain. They justify. They confess things you never asked for. You simply listen. When you don't overshare, you control access. Information becomes selective, intentional, earned, and in a world where everyone broadcasts their thoughts instantly, restraint feels unsettling. Unpredictability creates power. If they can't anticipate your reaction, they can't strategize around it. If they don't know what you're thinking, they can't manipulate the outcome. Your pause becomes a variable they can't solve. That's why they're fuming. Your restraint mirrors their lack of it. Your composure highlights how easily they're triggered. You remain steady while they leak emotion through every word and gesture. Your calm isn't passive, it's measured. You're not silent because you have nothing to say. You're silent because not everything deserves a response. You're not detached because you don't care. You're detached because you choose where your energy goes. And measured people are dangerous in chaotic rooms, not because they attack, but because they decide. And when you decide instead of react, you shift from being part of the noise to becoming the axis around which it moves. Now project forward. 5 more years of this discipline. 5 more years of refining your emotional control instead of surrendering it. Your reactions slower. Your decisions sharper. Your standards quieter, but higher. Social awareness no longer something you practice, but something you embody. Your circle becomes smaller. Not because you pushed everyone away, but because only a few can meet you where you operate now. Conversations become intentional, connections become strategic, energy becomes sacred. You won't need to announce your power. It will be felt in the way you enter a room without scanning for approval, in the way you decline what doesn't align, in the way your presence alone shifts the tone of an interaction. They thought you were isolated, you were incubating. This phase you're in right now isn't stagnation, it's refinement, pressure shaping structure, solitude strengthening identity. You are becoming harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to replace, and that evolution won't be loud, it will be undeniable. You don't need the room anymore. That's the difference. You're not scanning faces for approval, not adjusting your tone to match theirs, not performing for validation disguised as connection. You stand where you stand, steady, self-contained, and the room reacts to you not because you demand attention, but because you don't. You're not loud, not desperate, not chasing. And that's exactly why they're unsettled. They can sense the shift, the restraint, the distance that isn't insecurity, but discernment. You're present without being accessible. Observant without being intrusive. Calm without being passive. The loneliest person in the room isn't empty, they're contained. Contained power doesn't leak through constant talking. It doesn't beg to be recognized. It doesn't panic when ignored. It waits. And when it moves, it does so by choice, not by pressure.